So, yeah, I've been watching Struggle Beyond the Decade, and I will say to everyone, for veterans and family members and service members, if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about suicide or harming yourselves, think about who you love, but think about how you can get out of this rut and how you can make a difference and feel good about yourself, because there's other people out there that care about you.
When I asked for help, they opened up a Pandora's box inside of me, and he just kicked me out the door.
On this episode of Struggle Beyond the Decade, I will be traveling to Davenport, Iowa for a veteran rally in support of Operation Heartland, and then link up with the adventure enthusiasts and humanitarians Aaron Cooper and his brother Nathan, who from which formed the Enduro Bros. Aaron Cooper is a longtime friend, veteran, mixed martial arts teammate, and Army Ranger. I'll be meeting up to hear about their recent return from South America. We're going to find out how the Enduro Bros have worked together to give back while enlightening themselves through trying times. Stay tuned. This is a struggle beyond the decade. Rolling in here to finally catch up with my boy Aaron. Felt great. Last time I seen him, I was doing this, and he was doing that. Now I was going to get an opportunity to check out the Enduro bikes ridden by Nathan and Aaron Cooper. They rode these bad boys from their hometown of Chicago all the way through Tierra del Fuego.
We hugged them so tightly with our legs when it was freezing cold. Rub them out.
The Enduro brothers rode their Kawasaki Suzuki Ninja KRX 8000 Super GT Turbo dirt bikes all the way from Illinois to Tierra del Fuego, Chile. They helped the orphans in Guatemala. They served the people of Peru. They even had to endure a snag at the border of Peru and Bolivia, and some broken bones to boot. All meanwhile raising money for Task Force Dagger.
Nothing. Like, so what are you gonna do? Like, we're taking you. They're ours. Yeah, you signed right. They kept showing us the papers that we signed when we entered, and they were dated a year and a half earlier. And like, you have 90 days. It's obviously past 90 days, so they're ours now, forever. And then they told us that we could get them back, but it was only to make us leave. Because that happens a lot too. Like, they give you information that's enough information to make you think that you have a way to go, and then as soon as you start pursuing that, it's like, oh no, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
That was just one of the many problems that the Enduro brothers would encounter along the way to the end of the world. Let's see what they have next. But first,
I wanted to learn a little bit more about Operation Heartland and what these two veterans are doing on their mission to raise funds for veteran support services and to pay respect to those who have been casualties in what's been the longest war in American history. What's your difference in population-wise with veterans here? Is it younger generation? Have they got involved, or is it still a lot of the Vietnam veteran guys that are?
The exact breakdown I don't know, but they said there was something like 14,000 veterans in the Quad Cities. We have 700, about 650 to 700 members.
For this one alone. Wow, that's pretty good.
And most of them are Korean and Vietnam.
So there's not a lot of involvement with the younger guys yet.
No, it's like everybody else. I didn't get involved with the American Legion until after I retired.
Right.
Because you just got so much other stuff to do.
Well, so I've been traveling around and I've visited different Legion halls too, and some of the things that they've been talking about is like that there's not a large veteran community from Iraq, Afghanistan, guys that are getting out or have retired.
I know when I came back from Vietnam, I came to the American Legion, and they really didn't.
The American Legion was chartered and incorporated by Congress in 1919 as a patriotic veteran organization devoted to mutual helpfulness. It is the nation's largest wartime veteran service organization committed to mentoring youth and sponsorship of wholesome programs in our communities. They advocate for patriotism and honor, promoting strong national security and continued devotion to our fellow service members and veterans. But first, I want to hear what these two veterans are doing and their mission on Operation Heartland.
So I'm Justin Matejcek. I'm the president and founder of Veterans Adventure Group. And anyway, we got involved with Daniel on this Operation Heartland, and what he wanted to do, he wanted to go down the Mississippi and place these plaques on the way with all these American flag plaques with the initials of every service member who's been killed in action since 9/11. Also those that have been killed supporting the global war on terrorism.
We decided about a year ago to start an operation to connect with other veterans and community members. We had a name, Operation Heartland, had no idea what we wanted to do. And then I told my wife one day I wanted to paddle down the Mississippi, because what better way to go through the heartland of America than go through down the Mississippi. She thought I was crazy, but she supported me.
So now it's turned into we're paddleboarding down the Mississippi, which that in itself, there's only 2 other people that have possibly done it. There's a little bit of confusion here and there whether or not they actually did, but so that being said, it's fairly new to have done, and it adds a whole nother set of challenges when you're paddleboarding versus like kayaking or canoeing or anything, So, and then as we go down, we're placing these American flag plaques down there, and it's kind of cool. It's one of the things where kind of reminded me of like the Vietnam Wall when you see it, in the sense that you'll hear X amount of people were killed during this conflict, but when you actually see all the names and you see the 44 flags all together, it's kind of humbling, and really that's the main mission, is to kind of pay respect to those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
We designed 44 flags, and with the 44 flags, they each have roughly about 155 initials on them, and they will collectively have all the initials of every service member who's been killed in direct combat operations or support operations on the global war on terrorism since 9/11. Each flag, they're placed in various locations along the Mississippi thus far, in either VFWs, city halls, areas that are known for their large support of veterans in the community. And this way, at the end of the journey, we can design like a map to give to the Gold Star families of America, and people can come and see these things. Because it's one thing to say, okay, we're gonna honor a group of service members, but to actually see that on somebody's wall and say, these people gave the ultimate sacrifice, and for a Gold Star family to be able to actually go and see that, in a location that is not a sad location, but a beautiful location.
What do you feel is encouraging or is going to make changes to the ongoing struggles with veteran suicide?
So when it comes to veteran suicide, there's a lot of different directions I can go with that, but ultimately what it comes down to is there's a lot of, Josh actually likes to say connection is a cure. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of times veterans alienate themselves. Being a veteran yourself, you kind of get it. Like you go to the military, you're kind of like, I don't want anything to do with the military. And you get as far away from the military, other veterans as you can. And then a few years go by, and you're kind of like, kind of miss jumping out of planes, I kind of miss shooting, kind of miss, all that stuff. And, ultimately after a few years, you really just realize that you lost, there's something that was there that you no longer have. And I think stuff like this is a great example of there are so many other alternatives to getting out there and getting help that don't require medication, that don't require all this treatment that's very hard on your body. I guess it's kind of ironic because what we're doing is definitely not good for our bodies either. But And again, I look at the suicide side of it too. Like I was talking before, the suicide rate is actually higher among soldiers who have not deployed than soldiers who have deployed. And I kind of would always laugh when I got out of the military. Like, everyone was quick to say, "Well, you got PTSD, you should go to the VA and get checked out." And I get so annoyed. It's like, no, like what happened overseas doesn't bother me. I went in the military knowing what I was getting into. There's a reason I did what I did. I was very ready for it. I'm not saying it doesn't, bother me from time to time. But at the end of the day, what bothered me is I got back and, I'm sitting in this college classroom one day and I remember thinking about it. And we were talking about foreign relations. And some professor went off on some stuff in Afghanistan here and there. And I'm just kind of chuckling to myself. Like 6 months ago, I was in Afghanistan, calling in airstrikes as we're getting ambushed. And like here I'm in a college classroom with a bunch of kids that the only thing they give a crap about is where the party is at this weekend. And I was just not in their world at all, and I felt very alienated. But it was getting into these smaller groups that really changed things. I got into mountain biking and I kind of got into that little community. And like, that's when everything started changing for me. And like, as a veteran, you get back and you try to mesh with the civilian environment again. And you come back and you got all these civilians and you really don't feel like you fit anywhere. But I found that if you start to focus on the smaller individual group or these smaller groups, especially in extreme sports, it's a very tight-knit, small community. Suddenly you're around other people that think just like you. And like when I go skydiving, the majority of people that are skydivers at the DZs I go to are veterans. I don't know who they are. I don't know who the skydivers and the civilians are. Every now and then I'll learn like, oh, man, you were in the service, man? I've been jumping with you for a year and I had no idea, But again, that's just because at the end of the day, you're all working together to do something that's really dangerous, but yet awesome. And it's awesome to be in that environment. And that's what gives me that peace and that comfort. And that's what makes me kind of, like, it takes away from the whole suicide side of it. Like, I think we'd have a lot less suicide if veterans would get out there and just get connected, And I can't think we can always look to the VA for answers, Not to mention, like I kind of made one of my missions, especially with my nonprofit, is I like to say veterans aren't broken. We're so quick to say veterans are broken. And the problem is we have such a negative image to society of veterans as a liability. When you talk to a civilian about a veteran, immediately they think, oh, well, I'm so sorry. Like you have PTSD, TBI, or you wounded. And, all these negative things. And I'm not saying those aren't issues by far. Like, don't get me wrong, those are issues and they're very important issues. But the reality of it is veterans are trained to thrive in these chaotic and extreme environments. And you come back to the civilian world, and I'm sorry, you just don't have that. But you can manufacture that environment through extreme sports and through stuff like this where, like, every day you get up, it sucks. It's miserable paddling into the wind. But it kind of brings back that military mindset of, like, we got a job to do, and let's get it done. It doesn't matter how much it sucks, we're going to do it. And that's the environment you thrive in. So why not put veterans back in that environment? And sometimes I think we're doing it all wrong. We're trying to, mesh these veterans into this world that we're just not really cut out to be in. And so again, let's put them in an environment they thrive in and give them that out that way, instead of saying, well, no, you're just not right. Get treated this and that, and it'll go away. Like that's not the right way to do it. So.
As Operation Heartland continues their mission paddling down the Mississippi, let's check in with the Enduro Bros.
My name's Aaron Cooper. I'm a veteran of 1st Ranger Battalion. Got medically separated actually after I'd spent some time away from there during my time in the military. I got out and started doing some college and stuff, but I found myself kind of longing for the challenges and adventures that I'd been afforded in the military, and just started traveling. I traveled and I met up with my brother Nathan, who you guys met in Southeast Asia, and realized that that was something I enjoyed. It was an adventure in itself, traveling. So I came back and I started doing some school and contracting, and again, it was the same thing. I was just kind of finding myself anxious and wanting to be challenging myself and adventuring. And so I realized that I hadn't ever set foot on South American soil, and that more or less, and we'd find out it's not quite that easy, but more or less we're connected to them by land. So I figured I wanted to go there, and I figured a great way to do it would be on two wheels. So I had an enduro motorbike, and I started making tentative plans to take off and leave for South America. At the time, it wasn't anything that was meant to be more than just me stepping out and taking an adventure. Nathan came with after I'd asked him to, and we left.
My name is Nathan Cooper, and I'm half of the Enduro Bros with my brother Aaron. And we've been over the past 5 years. So over the past 5 years, that's right. We started a trip at our home near Chicago, and we wanted to ride motorcycles, enduros, from there all the way to until the earth ends in the south, so Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. And we started this journey then. We didn't realize at the time that it was going to take about a year total in travel over the course of 5 years of starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And one of the things that's been important to us as we've been doing this is volunteering at places and raising funds for important causes.
The first trip, we ran into all kinds of problems, and we got put behind schedule, and that eventually led to an accident that broke Nathan's leg and actually resulted in him getting a pretty serious surgery. At that point, we went home. Now, we were never going to stop. Our goal was to touch the end of land, and being a very goal-driven guy, and the fact that, to start with, that was a challenge that we'd taken on, that was never out of our minds that we weren't going to finish this trip.
As we got to meet other motorcycle adventurers, largely unprepared for what was coming for us. And a lot of the times we rode, and when it rained, we just got wet. And when things got cold, we just got cold. We have a tent for 3 seasons, so it was never that bad for the first leg of the journey until we got to Colombia, and I broke my ankle really badly, and that ended that trip for them. And that led to an infection, a long recovery time, and eventually, due to the great people that we met in Colombia who became family, we were able to leave the motorcycles there and come back.
So we went down again, and again we ran into more problems, and this time we made it a bit further south. So the third and last time we went down, we realized that something that had been very important to us the whole way and vital to us in this mission was helping along the way, and that included working at orphanages. We assisted some doctor teams in the Amazon jungle. We actually took our motorcycles, our enduros, and put them on little wooden boats and took a 16-hour ride down into the Amazon to get to this area where people were being helped and help out for a while. But in the long run, that actually ended up in us taking more time than we meant to and not advancing our miles in the trip, and our time would run out, or our motorcycles would break, and we wouldn't have time to fix the problems and finish this trip. So the third time we set out, we decided that instead of stopping along the way and taking on these little missions, that instead we would help a group and continue the mission without stopping. And that meant that we had to choose a mission that was close to our hearts, and something that we could use our social media and the followers we'd picked up to advance this cause. And for me, that was pretty easy. I just had to get permission from my brother. But for me, the thing I wanted to do was help veterans. As a lot of you guys know that are veterans, there's all kinds of struggles we're watching our friends go through, and the worst of that being veteran suicide is a plague right now in our community. It's not too long. Basically, when you don't hear of a person in your unit committing suicide for a month or two, you start to worry, because you're thinking, man, it's been 2 months since we've had a guy, and we lost a guy to suicide, and you start to kind of almost worry, like who's it going to be? What phone call am I going to get? After serving with these guys, man, these guys are strong men, and they have so much to offer, and they've overcome such adversity, and losing them is such a detriment to our society, because these guys, they're strong and have experience and have overcome things that the people in the civilian world maybe can't even understand. And so it's a tragedy to see them, and it affects all of us personally too, and takes a bit out of us every time we hear that. So that's something that was near to me, and Nathan, when I explained that to him, was very supportive, and so right away we reached out and found Task Force Dagger. I explained a bit before, but Task Force Dagger uses recreational therapy to give guys kind of, I didn't realize this at the time, but this trip for me was recreational therapy. Who knows, if I had stepped out and started taking on these challenges and these adventures and pushing myself, who knows how long it could have been before I was finding myself in those same places, you know. So when I reached out to Task Force Dagger, they said, man, you basically self-medicated with one of our prescriptions. You went out, and so I think they thought we were a good fit for their organization, and so we supported them. Another thing they do that's very important is they connect this gap, because with the DoD and the VA, they don't always have the ability to give the best health care. It's just not there. So Task Force Dagger does things like paying extra money so these guys can go to clinics and they get blood tests, and they start saying, okay, you're having these thoughts, you're having these problems. Let's look at your blood. Let's look at it, and let's sort out where your vitamin deficiencies are, your hormone levels. Let's look at all these things and get you as holistically cured and healthy as possible before we even start thinking about these medications. And the VA and the DoD they're not there yet. And so Task Force Dagger does things like this to allow veterans to heal more holistically. So we decided to make this last portion of the trip to ride for Task Force Dagger. We came into some real adversity right after we started. We got down to Lima and expected to be on the road in a week, and we found out that even though we'd asked the mechanic and we had some miscommunications and we had all these parts, that we still needed to get the bikes moving down the road. And it took 3 weeks of us wandering down the streets of Lima, and Lima was a kind of sooty, dirty place. And so after the end of all these days of just sitting in traffic, we just wipe the soot off of our face with a towel, you know, and a lot of times we came up empty-handed, a whole day of going down these side streets with our bad Spanish, asking for these very specific motorcycle parts that just weren't there.
Neither Aaron nor I have the greatest Spanish skills. Especially when we started, we spoke a little bit. I had worked with some Mexicans, and I had taken a couple of classes in high school, but beyond that, it was not a whole lot. Pretty early on, we got, breakfast foods, lunch foods, dinner foods. Mostly we just talked about food because essentials. And if anything was more complicated than that, it took some miming.
And so after 3 weeks, we were so excited to get on the road. And so we did. We left. We said goodbye to our mechanic, who we're close friends with, and took off down the road.
So as it turns out, we didn't have all the parts, and now we've been on the road for, 3 hours maybe, trying to figure out where to get this rectifier at. So we're worn out. We thought we had everything, and then it turned out that Suzuki here in Beirut didn't have the parts. So now we're still wandering around. It's been dismal. We've had a few breakdown and arguments. Not breakdowns, but we've had a few disagreements. Got a dog fight going on over here. Protecting his turf. How do you feel, Nathan?
Great time. Having a great time.
Took off down the road, and it wasn't 2 hours later that we were going about 55 miles per hour and hit a construction zone, and my front tire ended up in a groove, and I've never experienced a wobble so hard. I tried to stand up and get on my pegs to try and balance it out. It was too late, and the left side of my bike bashed into the asphalt, and then the right side as well. I hit so hard on the left side that the whole bike came back over, and before I know it, I'm on the ground, and I realize I'm kind of broken, but we're in a construction area, and before I can even take a second to collect my thoughts, there's this construction work over me, and "Cómo está? Cómo está?" He's like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Man, you just saw what happened, bro. Like, I'm not good." But my answer is like, "Bien, todos bien." I got no diaphragm, and I just busted up, and so that happened. And then 2 days later, I get this horrible cold. I've got 3 broken ribs in the back of my ribs, and so I'm sneezing, and then every time I sneeze, I fall over like a fainting goat and just moan, and I'm concerning all the local people. So that was all fine and dandy because, as Nathan said, like, these were small things. You can suck that up and you can push through.
On the way to the hospital, the Enduro brothers made a stop at Club Despacito del Policía.
Guys, help me out. We got parts now. Repuestos.
Bailando hueva.
But a few days later, we made it to the border of Peru where our bikes had been, and we just kind of found ourselves bogged down and stuck in Peru. We have, 6 months, 5 to 6 months just in Peru, and we meant to be there for a month volunteering and then kind of work our way out. And so we were so excited, man. We're on top of the world. Like, the bikes are moving. I'm a bit banged up, but man, we're getting out of Peru, and then we're gonna win, man. This is it. Victory's in sight. We just got to keep on going south. It was our own fault, but we didn't fill out paperwork for our bikes before we left Peru. We found ourselves, because of the volunteer time we took and then the problem with the motorcycle, we got it fixed. We rushed to the border. That took like more time. We get to the border the second time around, and we say we can't make it. This bike is spewing oil out of the exhaust. It's got a serious problem. That was after we took the time and money to get it fixed, and the most logical thing was to return to Lima to get it fixed. That put us out of time. We're out of time. We had no time left on our visas. We were on day 87, I think, at that point. So we rushed back to Lima. Our mechanic said, "Get on the road, guys. I understand. You guys got to leave." And so that was the mistake we made. When we came back and got to that border that day, they took our bikes.
So we're stuck at the border again, this time because we have special papers, which are indeed exceptional. We are an exception because we went through and did all the work. It took a month. And now we've tried to show these papers to the official at the border, and it's blown his mind, and he won't let us through to get out of Bolivia. And that's what we're doing right now. We're waiting to get out of Bolivia. Maybe they won't let us out of Peru, and then we'll overstay the 48 hours we've been granted, and then we'll get our bikes taken all over again.
That was about the worst feeling I felt in a very long time. There was so much put into this mission. Nathan had broken his legs and had 4 or 5 surgeries because of it. During the duration of the mission, I had 4 surgeries, I think, on my own knee. There was so much money of our own put into it, so much time, so many people we told we were doing this. And now, just months before, we teamed up with Task Force Dagger, and Task Force said, what do you need to make this happen? Nothing. We just want to support you guys. And here we are less than 2 months later, and just nothing. We have nothing. The bikes were the heart of the mission, and now they're gone.
And we think we have everything in order to enter that archway over there, which signifies Bolivia. Good luck.
One of the things that we were happiest about as what we initially thought was just going to be a 3-month knock it out, say we did it. It ended up becoming something where we stopped, got to meet people, got to interact and become part of communities and with people in Peru, in Iquitos, and in Coban, Guatemala, and several other communities that we got to actually be a part of and got to meet and become family with people throughout Central and South America. And it became something much more than what we initially had planned.
And so we fought a long time for those bikes, but really during that time period it was very depressing for more than one reason. As Nathan said, is we never knew if we'd advanced our cause at all. Every day we spent in the offices pleading. Every time we made a phone call to an official, whether we got to talk to them or not or leave a message, we never knew if any of that was having any effect. And as it turns out, it didn't.
When they confiscated our motorcycles in Peru, because we went such a long period of time that we didn't have any responses. The embassy couldn't help us out. The officials were either intentionally or unintentionally unhelpful. And we had reached blocks at every point, and that one was probably the hardest for us because it wasn't a physical thing to overcome, and it wasn't something that we could just, buck up. It was we didn't have anything to go off of, and we were just having faith that something would happen that would let us continue our trip, our journey.
We got very lucky because the law changed, and it took them a month and a week to decide what they're going to do with that law change, because it happened basically as soon as they confiscated our bikes. So we got the bikes back, and that put us into a whole nother world of suffering because that was winter time, and that put us down into the winter. And
we did, in the end, still tackle Patagonia in the winter. So ice, snow, all sorts of terrible things, falling down a lot. The whole progress was at times very, very slow, but
I think we've done it. Right now, there's a man making our bikes legal to ride in Bolivia.
I mean, we were legal to ride for 48 hours in Peru, and we got out.
We battled with the same border guards we recognized from before, and one new special one. We argued Nathan said, let's go. I said, no.
He said, my computer doesn't accept what I am typing into it, so you can't cross here. And I'm like, after a long talk, he's like, no, you're abnormal. I can't deal with abnormal here. You have to go to Desequidero.
Then I went in and had a talk with him, and now we're in Bolivia.
Yeah, except that talk ended up lasting like 2 hours. And
it wasn't a little talk, it was a long talk.
And then the special guy, he decided to play volleyball for a while.
He's playing volleyball. He's like, yeah, I'll check on that. I'll talk to the boss. And
I'm going to put a phone call in, right? Just give me a mic.
And the funny thing was it was a bunch of children and then him. He was just like spiking on these little kids. It was awful.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we're okay. I think we're in Bolivia.
We're in Bolivia. Sí, verde.
Verde, todos.
Hooray for Bolivia! Hooray for Bolivia! Oh, I messed up! Oh, Bolivia!
What are you going to do about it? We made it down to the Carretera Austral, which is the road after the Pan American. And it's cut up. There's areas where you have to take a ferry to get from one place to the next, because that's just the way that it's all islands or unpassable ground sometimes. But normally really good riding.
Some of the most picturesque scenery. I mean, of course, it's Patagonia.
Yeah.
It's amazing down there.
Yeah, it was great. It was also the time of year when you just get rained on. So by the time we got there, we were miserable from just day after day of getting completely soaked. And we get a few opportunities to stay in bed, but sometimes we're camping. And when you're camping, I mean, we literally burned through shoes, socks, all kinds of things, trying to dry them, and just being very unsuccessful with that. So
basically, the idea being like,
injury,
even though it's going to be for 10, 15 minutes in the morning, it's just so much nicer to put on like dry socks.
Yeah, like that feeling when you're getting like another day of this.
Right.
You know, you want to feel good at the very beginning, because if it starts and ends with sucking.
Basically, the only dry time you had was like a little while after in your sleeping bag. You finally would have some dryness to your day, and then you fall asleep, wake up, and then you'd have to go put on wet boots and socks and riding clothes.
So we camped at an old, well, it's a spot people stay at when they go up the 15-minute drive to go skiing up there. Well, you can't even see it. That's a mountain up there.
Mountains.
There we go, now you can see it. So this is where we camped at last night. Nice man. We ate it as like a restaurant. And then we were like, hey, is there a place to camp around here? He's like, yeah. And he put us under this nice overhang. There's this A-frame here. Pretty cool. Another A-frame there. That one doesn't look as nice. Anyways,
Yeah, so back in Santiago when we were at our riders' hostel, I was told this is what we would expect, rain. We probably not snow, but we'd be rained on. So we ride into Coyhaique, it's nighttime, and in the middle of the night, after we've settled in and everything, I get up to use the restroom, and as I'm standing at the toilet, I look out the window, and it's a foot of snow. And that, I kind of dismissed it. I was like, this isn't real.
I actually had the exact same experience.
It's a dream.
I don't remember that view.
This isn't how this is. So we
stumble back to bed.
Yeah, wake up the next morning, and sure enough, unseasonably, like this hasn't happened for years, and we're told, like, people saying like, oh, isn't it crazy?
You're so lucky to have experienced this crazy snowstorm that came out of nowhere.
So we, from that moment on, it was just slow going on ice and snow. That first day, well, for me, I was never huge on motorcycles before this trip. I ended up learning to ride a motorcycle to go on this trip with Aaron. So this was the first time that I'd ever experienced anything like ice with a motorcycle, and it was, yeah, the learning curve is
It was
not
there,
good.
but there was one day, it wouldn't have mattered how good you were or not, without different machinery, without different gear, without some set of tires, there were certain days where there was just really nothing to do, where we actually got off the bikes and walked them for hours at a time to make a few miles, walking these things on top of a layer of ice that was just about, you could ice skate on it. It was that smooth.
Once we got in like the swing of things, I'm riding behind Aaron, and he'd start going up a hill and then slide back down, and I'd find a nice spot where I could park and then run and push him up as he's gunning it, and then once he get up to the top, he'd come back down, walk down, and push me up.
We experienced all kinds of. There was actually one kind of ice that was almost like riding. It was terrifying at first, but it was almost like riding on asphalt, because the ice had mixed with, as it froze, it mixed with all the rocks and the gravel.
Still traction.
And there was traction. So we actually rode on that like it was normal. But
there was when after we got to Puerto Tranquilo, which is where these marble caves are.
It's beautiful.
It's a great place, and about 15 miles before Puerto Tranquilo, the ice stopped. We like danced, we celebrated, we thought we did it, we're through it.
And people told us, oh, it's not like
there's no more from here on out. We were so excited about it, and then we spent a whole extra day in Puerto Tranquilo as like celebratory, almost like time to relax. We did it.
And to see those amazing caves.
Well, the caves were definitely worth it. And then after that, another 10 miles or less after Puerto Tranquilo, it's got to be like 3 inches ice, smooth, and it was raining.
I've never seen ice like that wasn't a lake.
Yeah, it was.
That was frozen.
It was like being on a lake. It was so smooth, and it was miserable. We made around 29 miles in a total of a whole day of
7.5 hours, and that was in the dark, you see, because
at
that point, something to note was that this ice wasn't melting, because we were only getting maybe 4 hours tops of daylight in the day, and the sun never seemed to be directly down there, melting the ice, and so it really was bad. Still, I would say the most terrifying experience was when we finally got to the end. We were still out in the middle of nowhere. We were like, yeah, we did. Wait a second, we're in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I mean, that day with the ice, though, it just never stopped, because there was everyone had closed for the season.
Yeah, back to that was we were trying to get out of the rain, because it started raining and snowing at the same time, and we were in the dark.
There's no hotels, places that were posted on our devices as being hotels and hostels. When we'd stop and it's dark, it's raining on us, we're freezing. Aaron, for a long period of time, is pushing his motorcycle because he's having electrical issues, and it's just not starting.
We can't bump start it on the ice.
It's very hard to bump start on ice.
So people are closing their doors to us. They're coming. They're literally turning off their lights so that we think they're not there. We like watch them.
We see them.
Turn off the light.
We're yelling like, "We see you!
We see you! I see you!" They're just like putting the curtain closed.
It just So this is again. It's demoralizing beyond what we already are, because it's getting to be 10, 11 o'clock
at night. I sweated through one layer on the inside, and the rain's soaked through the other side, and we're both just soaked and in freezing weather. It's below freezing at this point.
And I mean, we're not being incredibly kind to each other either, which doesn't help, because
how's that work out when you guys are brothers? I got a brother that
For the most part, people can't believe that we were brothers on the trip, you know, because we do treat each other fairly well. But I'm not gonna lie, there are times when, you know, things get really rough, and one of us might be slightly to blame for that situation, where the other person, you know, just expresses their displeased, maybe not in the kindest ways.
Get on the bike. Get on the bike. Get on the bike. Start the bike. Run the bike.
But for the most part, I think we treat each other well. But there was definitely days where there was falling outs, and this night wasn't really one of those. We kind of had to stick together in this one.
There's, I was resigned at some point, you know, because after the previous days of, you know, slowly crawling through snow, I just kind of was like, this is life now, and if we have to walk on ice with our motorcycles all night until it's day, then that's just what happens.
You learn there, right? Like,
that's
there
just
is
what
no
happened.
quitting. We're in the middle of nowhere, and so there were times when one of us would quit, and essentially that doesn't mean anything.
That night, I couldn't. I'm like, what does quitting actually look like?
It doesn't.
There's no there is no quit.
We can't ditch the bikes because we try to leave. We'll be called back, and they'll say, "Where's your motorcycle?" We can't.
There was
no
one
way to leave
vehicle
anyways.
that passed by us. One vehicle the whole time. No one's on this road.
So basically, what it comes down to, and it's a good metaphor for anything in life that's an obstacle that you're not is just another step, man. Just the next step. That's it, man. It's just the next step is all you got.
We couldn't do anything special. There was no
special tool to implement, no technique, nothing, no experience at that point could fix anything. And really, what it just came down to was things are awful now, and there's no way to make them better. You just got to take the next step.
Well, I think that applies to kind of how, you know, PTSD and veteran suicide works too. Is just finding that next step.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And just taking it as a challenge if you can, and taking pride in that you're taking that next step.
What that night, eventually the culmination of it was, after all of this, after a couple of dumps, Aaron, after, like, there's a driveway.
I'd broken both levers off my bike that night already at this point. I had no levers. I'm just used like pulling on clutch cables and brake.
Which was all the more impressive when we did push start the bike, because how are you doing that without brake? Anyways, like, he goes up this driveway to get to a place that's marked from the road as a hotel.
With cabinas.
And on the way up there, he ends up dumping the bike, dropping his phone, breaking his phone.
It was after the frustrating thing is that's after I got off the bike.
Yeah.
I got off the bike to walk, and that's when I slip on the ice, the bike falls on me, my phone gets shattered, which was our camera and our communication device at that point.
Yeah, and this place turned the lights off too.
So
we go back to the road. We're like, we just got to keep moving, and we get to another place, and it looks like this massive resort. We're like, well, we got to go see what. Maybe they
many lights on.
Maybe they have an awning that we can just, like, you know, not be rained on for a while. Anything, man. Just like,
so
we have to
sleeping bags
stop.
don't get soaked. We need dry sleeping bags.
Yeah.
Like, if our sleeping bags would have gotten wet at that point, it would have just been.
Yeah, like, again, there's no quit. But it would have.
Yeah.
There's a point where it just is. Yeah. So we go in.
Before we tell the end of the story, it's something we've missed when we're talking to you guys, is just the highlight of our trip, which was really the kindness of strangers, man. People want to think we're so divided, we're so separated, especially with our neighbors and stuff. And even in the countries we visited, they would tell us they were scared of their neighbors. And then we'd get to these places and we meet the most amazing people, and they would see what we were doing, and they just want to be a part of our adventure and part of our mission and a part of our goal. They saw it and they're like, yeah. And we actually got in a situation where people argued, like, come eat dinner with my family. No, they're coming to me, you know. And it was just, the kindness of strangers was definitely one of the themes and the highlights of the trip for me. People are amazing.
Because the kindness of the strangers that we met had been such a theme that I'm like, something's gonna happen. We can't just be miserable forever, can we?
So and the times when we were at those points where it was just despondent and we were just down, it almost inevitably something just hanging on, taking that next step, and eventually we'd make it, and somebody'd be like, I got you.
There was always eventually light.
We're at the Easy Airport here at the warehouse. We're putting the bikes in boxes so that we can have them at home in the United States with us.
And we didn't really have a better way to get out of this country within the next few.
Being illegal to leave the country without them really helped influence our decision. But
this was actually the easy out.
yeah, we have a flight going on tomorrow, and these guys said that they could put everything set for the bikes today. So we won't have a whole lot of time to enjoy Buenos Aires, but the weather is fantastic, and we're happy to not be cold and freezing and on motorcycles at the moment.
You're gonna have to zoom in a little bit because my finger's in some of that.
You love putting your finger in that.
We thought we'd be home by now. We found a great deal to get home, but unfortunately, due to the Argentinian winter break, we didn't really get to cash in on that. So now we're just kind of plane hopping in northerly direction. And today will be the first day in almost 5.5 months that we're going to be in the northern hemisphere. And I'm personally pretty pumped to be in the northern hemisphere.
We're going to Mexico.
You boys ever been to Mexico?
All right, so we talked about the adversity on the trip. So let's get into how is that? Have you seen that adversity apply to something that, or been the same or similar to something that you faced downrange?
Downrange. Okay. I was, at least with my own group of guys, I was very fortunate in that while I was on the deployments with them, we really didn't face any casualties, and that changed pretty quickly right after I left. I don't dream very much, and I really can only remember pretty well 2 dreams from my immediate adult life, and they're both the military, and one of them wasn't very realistic, and it actually happened the day I got medically separated, and I can address that very quickly because I think it actually is kind of pertinent to what we're talking about here today. But I was with a group of guys, some of them I knew and some of them I didn't, and we got pinned down in a position, and it was pretty clear like we weren't getting out of there. And then a truck came out of nowhere, a Humvee, and said, "Hey Cooper, let's go." And I got on the truck and we drove away and went to some comfortable place, and I don't remember all of it. I don't remember my dreams very well. But the next, that was more like a nightmare too, because I woke up feeling very, very bad. The next one was, my next nightmare was actually, it was real because it was the exact same thing that actually had happened. We were on a rescue mission, and we were supposed to be bringing back live hostages of prisoners of war, and also some that had passed away. That wasn't actually my immediate group's job, but very quickly things, as they often do, went sideways, and everything was very confusing. We found some people to direct us to the graves. You see, the power had been out for a while, and some people went to the morgue where these American bodies were and took them and had buried them elsewhere. And so we went with these men, these brave men that had stayed behind, and they took us to some shallow graves. As we walked closer, I'd say maybe almost even a football field away, you could smell this strange smell, and you knew something was going wrong. And we got closer and closer, and eventually you could see we never worked in daylight. This was in the middle of the night, and you could start to see these mounds in the earth. And one after another, there's just a row of these shallow mounds in what was a soccer field at one point. So we travel very light, you know. We travel very light, and we're told this mission, just bring what you need, bring the essentials. You're not going to need anything else. You're going to be in and out, which isn't always true. But in this case, we did actually get in and out pretty quick. But what we came to were shallow graves. They were shallow graves. The ground was hard there, and it was very dry. And immediately they had the chaplain. The chaplain showed up, so you know something was about to happen. And he said he needed some of the more senior guys that were extra, which is kind of redundant, or no, excuse me, it's an oxymoron. You know, senior guys aren't redundant. You know, they're needed. So I actually had my my tab at that point, which in Ranger Regiment means you're a leader, and I was kind of extra on my gun team. So they sent me to go talk to the chaplain, and he asked me if I had my chemical gloves. At that point in Iraq, even despite the heat, we were traveling around in our chemical suits, which basically I'd be comfortable snowboarding in it. It was very warm, and it was always on us, and we always had, because of that, always had chemical gloves, and our pro masks with us as well. And so he's like, do you have your chemical gloves? And he's like, yeah, I put them on. And then he told me, like, start digging. We didn't have anything to dig with, so we're digging with our hands. And the very first thing I saw was the bridge of a nose, and then some eyes. And these were American soldiers, and some of them had been, it looked like they'd been executed. Maybe they'd already been mortally wounded. I don't know their stories exactly. But, I made the mistake pretty early on after unearthing one of them. And it wasn't me digging alone. More and more guys dropped security because we can't work in the daylight, and the city was a dangerous city. So as we started digging, we got closer and closer to being able to get these guys out of the ground, and girls. And the very first time I thought I could, I grabbed down, I reached, and I ended up with just a hand of flesh. And all these brave men, man, they were just stellar people, but we were all just digging through, each other's vomit. Guys were just throwing up, man, and yeah, that was probably the most traumatizing memory I have. I do pretty well with it, like I said, but that nightmare was just that very same night of that mission, waking up in the middle of the desert, waiting to get, exfilled out of there, and my nightmare was that exact same experience, and just coming to, startled. And other than that, I've been pretty lucky. Those things. In that night, I feel like my coping method was I just kind of separated with my body. I almost felt like I was floating off somewhere else as I was just going about my work. And I'm lucky because that, at least as of yet, hasn't really had those sort of experiences. Haven't had a heavy weighing down effect on me, as I know that some people, they affect them differently. And that's something. Coming from that community, you have the wrong attitude to begin with, and that's one of being just this hard alpha male, and thinking that maybe people that can't handle those things are weaker than you or something. That's just not the case. We're all given different thresholds and different parts of our psyche that we're able to bear different things, and when one of us is weak, the other one is strong, and vice versa. And so I've learned a lot since then, and that's definitely, yeah, you want to know about trauma. That's the most traumatizing experience I think I had in all of my service. Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, man, that's one of the things about Task Force Dagger that I really liked, is that they are a special operations group, but there's no walls. They'll help any veteran of any special operation group, because you have a lot of these people that seclude themselves, and I think that's something that's really good that we're seeing happen, is people reaching across these borders, and no one's ever saying, man, you should be stronger. That's not the case, man. We're here for each other. And so talking about thresholds, if I'm in a period where I'm strong, and there's going to be a period later where I'm going to be in a slump. That's just the way human nature is. And so, man, I think we just need to reach out to each other so much more and try to have community. I heard someone earlier today saying, for some reason, the very first thing you do when you get out of the Army is isolate yourself and try to separate yourself from that group of people. And I think maybe that's not the healthiest thing to do, even though it's your first impression, it's your first instinct to run the opposite direction. But there's so many groups you can look for, and it's just not a thing of weakness, because some of the healthiest, strongest looking guys I know, one day you get a notification from one of your friends and they're gone. And it's tragic, and every time it happens, it just hits you, and it doesn't stop, because it's going to happen again later. It's going to happen again, and so I just don't see it the same way anymore. I've grown up, and these guys weren't weak. They never were. They're strong, and so there's something more to it. You take this group of the cohesion's incredible. These guys working together, these operators and aviators and whatever your job is, man. The cohesion is incredible. These guys are a unit that works together, and they're also superheroes, man. They're working together, doing these incredible tasks, and they're heroes. They're heroes, and they're working for this greater cause. And then one day, whether it's medically or their time's up or they can't do it anymore, they decide to separate. And I really see, besides the head trauma and the stuff we go through as veterans, as they step away, man, you can kind of get lost out there, because now you're separate from all those things. You're separate from that group of guys. You're separate from that cause and that purpose that you had. And I think it's so important to redirect that cause and purpose into helping the people around you. Veterans, for sure. Whether just find people that you can associate with and you care for, man, and take care of each other as veterans. People are like, "What's your next adventure?" Even you are, like I'm coming. I'm like, I'm gonna go to college, and then I might go up to the lake in Wisconsin for a week this summer.
For the last 5 years of my life, I've been saving money for this trip and sunk a lot of any of the money that I've been making into the trip.
Yeah, relatively, a lot of your money has been, and me too, it's been.
Yeah,
this.
It's been the major thing that's been happening. Anytime I've been working, it's been putting money aside. So from here, I'd love to still be involved in things for Task Force Dagger, and it's something that I'm committed to. If there's things that I can help, or if another adventure comes up, I would do it.
That's it from Enduro Land. Surely one day these brothers will ride again. Until then, amigos, hasta la
After being inspired by my friends' stories, I realized that we need to build authentic relationships. We need to begin to listen to veteran stories and hear the family members in these communities. Once we can begin to address the needs with long-term solutions, then we can begin to teach skills, provide training, and modify to create new programs. We also need mentors, people with an inside perspective. By empowering passionate individuals, we can give struggling veterans a self-sufficient and independent recovery program. With this, we can replicate success and multiply in various corners of the United States. Don't try to destroy a veteran's dignity by trying to solve or project a cure that may or may not fit your timelines. Don't yield the talents of a veteran by dictation. Allow us positions within the community, positions that give us confidence to lead ourselves out of the darkness. This is a struggle beyond the decade.
That his chosen word, abracadabra, might possibly be used.
That's his favorite word?
Oh yeah.
I feel like you're playing a trick on me, man.
No.
Is someone gonna dump like a bucket of water on my head?
No,
Ice bucket. It's a Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah, come on. You both can,
Abracadabra.
Count to three. Count to three.
Well, no, I feel like I want to step away from the sledge over here.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Right there.
Okay.
Right there. All right, count to three. Yeah, look behind you. All right, count to three.
Hit us?
We just need to say the word abracadabra.
Okay.
Right, 1, 2, 3.
Abracadabra. We're the Enduro Bros. You totally, of course, we're not going to say we are and separate every word like.
We're.
No.
The.
No, don't spread it out.
We're
the Enduro Bros.
One more again.
One more again.
We are.
Come on, man.
You know what?
One,
you know what?
two.
You have the beard. Do like a Randy Savage.
We're the Enduro Bros, brother.
It's true.
That was more Hulk Hogan. I can't talk anymore.
Sweet.
Something
Is it carp again?
They're eating carp and
I ate.
My buddy's like,
so good. I already ate.
Here for dinner, man.
Snugged right in with them.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's like being in our little mountain gear 2-person tent, a thru hiker.
Back of Aaron's motorcycle, a dog jumped up and I dragged it with my broken ankle for a while. That was a bad time. but it's not. We don't have very good footage of that because I wasn't in the mindset to be taking the camera out and be like.
1, 2, 3. We've walked into this mall kind of place, and it's creeping me out a little bit. Lots of stuff like this going on.
Baby one-eyed chef.
Baby one-eyed chef. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Come down. You have a lot to live for, I think. I don't know you personally. We gotta track him down. He's perfect for you. There's a dog being mean to another dog, and he totally regulated and like said, "Not on my streets, you don't." There's this dog that was just being mean to all the other dogs, and this dude, he's not bigger than the other dog or anything, but he just ran up and was like, "Knock it off," and the other dog left. What's your name? All right, it's been 5 minutes. Gonna rinse this stuff off.